Alex Sarr's NBA career has gotten off to a terrible start. I don't care how bad the draft class is. I don't care what kind of role players you think are going to come out of the class. Anytime you pick someone second overall in a class, you want them to look like they belong in Summer League. You want them to show up and at least look like a decent NBA player and have that kind of a ceiling and have that kind of a future. And this start to his career is about as bad as it gets. And the question is this the next Anthony Bennett? Is this the next, sorry Wizards fans, Johnny Davis? The guy that shows up, sucks right away, and we all know straight away that they're just not going to make it. Obviously, it's too early to tell if that's actually the case for Alex Sarr, but there's one thing that is going to determine the entirety of his NBA career, and that's his willingness to understand who he is as a player. Because we've seen guys come into the league with his kind of archetype that think that they're the next Kevin Durant. They think that they're going to be a primary offensive player because they're tall and they can shoot a little bit. And what they don't understand is that we will probably never see another Kevin Durant. And if we do, it's going to be a very long time. Having that level of body control, shooting, skill, all that stuff just doesn't happen. It's not supposed to be possible. And if you think that you're Kevin Durant and you're Alex Sarr, you are wrong. And you're going to end up as one of these role player guys. You're going to end up as Mo Bamba, someone that didn't develop as a role player, as a complementary player the way that they should have. And if that's the mindset and mentality that Alex Sarr has, he's going to fail. But I do think that there is a lot of talent here. There's a lot of stuff to like. When you think about over the past couple of seasons, guys that have come into the league that have grown into this complementary role, someone like Jabari Smith in Houston, someone like Chet Holmgren in OKC, depending on the situation, that to me feels like the kind of player that Alex Sarr could grow into. And in a year, 2 years, nobody will remember the absolutely terrible summer league showing that he had. Because he has length, he has athleticism, he has defensive instincts to be an impactful two-way player. And honestly, I don't think the shot looks that bad either. Obviously, the shooting numbers weren't great in summer league at all, but I do think that there's something there. I think that he can be a floor spacer and a defender and a two-way player. And when you think about Jabari Smith, when you think about Chet Holmgren, that to me feels like the role that Alex Sarr could ultimately be successful in. If you're a Wizards fan and you're hoping that you got someone that's going to be a primary offensive option, that is just not a realistic expectation. And I hope that he understands that as well, and hope Washington understands that, because that to me is what's going to make this extremely difficult for him. Is even if he realizes a couple months in, a year in, okay, I'm not going to be Kevin Durant, I'm not going to be making all NBA teams, but I could be a really good two-way complementary player for when we hopefully get, whether it be Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey or whoever it is in the upcoming draft, and be that complementary guy alongside them. Even if he realizes that, Washington's not exactly a great place for him to be able to develop that skill set, because they're going to rely on him offensively, unless it's just going to be a lot of Jordan Poole and Bub Carrington and Kyle Kuzma. Like, they're going to ask Alex Sarr to do a little bit of mid to high post creation to try and get to the rim a little bit, really see and test his offensive skill set. And it's not necessarily the wrong decision for a young guy to really find out exactly what his limitations are and try and grow and develop him into a high caliber offensive player. It's just, that isn't the stuff that he should be working on. If he's trying to make sure that he is the best NBA player he can be, have the longest career he can have, that's not the role that he should be playing in. I think that's one of the issues that we saw for him in Summer League, even against a lower level of competition. That's just not a role that he's comfortable in at this point in his career. If you're going to give him the ball at the high post and say, hey, go get a bucket, it's probably not going to go well. And that's why I bring up the Jabari Smith comparison. He wasn't good in Summer League until his most recent Summer League, because they were asking him to do all the stuff that he's just not comfortable with. Like, he needs to play alongside good guards. He needs to be a complementary guy, someone that attacks closeouts, someone that gets open jumper, someone that rolls to the rim, uses his athleticism and his energy to get buckets in the lane. That's who he needs to be. And I think there's a lot of similarities there with Alex Sarr. And also to the beginning of Jabari Smith's career, that opportunity just might not really be there in Washington to grow alongside other really good players. Like, imagine if, for example, Alex Sarr ended up in that OKC situation that Chet ended up in 2 years ago. Obviously, he was hurt his first year, played this most recent season. How much better would you feel about the long-term prospect of Alex Sarr as an NBA player if he was in that situation in OKC last year, the year before, the kind of player that he is right now? He's not as good of a shooter as Chet, and Chet's timing and ability to block shots at the rim is a level above where Alex Sarr is right now. I'm not questioning that at all. But I do think that the situation for him and the kind of player he ultimately becomes is going to be the absolute biggest key to him being anything in the NBA. And sometimes that's just how it works out. Like, there's definitely cases throughout the league. You look at draft history of guys that should have worked out, that worked hard at their game, that tried to improve and just were never in the right situation through the first handful of years. Like, it's so hard to compare the situation in OKC the last 2 years compared to what Alex Sarr is going to experience the next 2 years in Washington. You think about guys that ended up in Sacramento and all these franchises that historically all their top picks are bad because the situation is just bad. And the problem for Sarr is he's arguably as situation dependent as any player in the entire class. And there's going to be guys behind him like Reed Shepherd that are, one, in better situations, two, more pro ready, and three, aren't as reliant on the situation that they're in, that are going to look better as NBA players early on in their career. But I do still have hope for him. You can't deny the physical profile, some of the skills that he's shown. If he can figure out how to shoot the ball and be an impactful two-way player, whether it be at the 4 or the 5, there's a high ceiling on those kinds of guys. Teams are leaning more and more into this concept of having a complementary second or third option on your team. With as expensive as the payrolls are going to get over the next couple of seasons with some of the new rules, the era of big threes, of the third best guy on the team being, Chris Bosh out there, who's an all-star, all-NBA caliber player in his own right, that's just kind of not the mold anymore. Like, you want these Chet Holmgrens, these Jabari Smiths, these what Alex Sarr could be kinds of players to build a true championship level team. And I still think that ceiling exists for him. The problem is, and we've seen this with guys in the past, Jabari Smith seems to have mostly overcome it, is when you get off to this bad of a start, obviously it's just summer league, but that kind of stuff can carry over when you just never feel like any of your shots are going to go in, when your confidence level just isn't there. The number one thing that's going to keep you off the floor as a young player in the NBA, regardless of how highly you were drafted, is an inability to make shots. And if Alex Sarr can't make threes, if he can't space the floor, and he doesn't turn into like some bruising full-time 5, which seems unlikely, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to get any kind of minutes to develop in Washington. And so ultimately right now, I would bet against him becoming anything of real substance at the NBA level, just because his skill set in comparison to guys like Jabari Smith, guys like Chet, is just lower when those guys came in the league compared to when he's coming into the league. I do think that there's a path, but this is just the worst situation for him in terms of the supporting cast, in terms of the role he's going to be asked to play. And that's the danger of being a team like Washington that's bad for years and years in a row, that doesn't put a ton of talent around their young guys. You end up wasting some of these picks sometimes because there's very few guys that come into the league. This happens like every few years, maybe, of guys that come into the league and can overcome a bad situation like Washington, that are so good that they are just by their sheer talent level not going to fail at the NBA level. Those kinds of guys don't show up very often. They certainly did not exist in the 2024 class. And when you look at some of the other guys that were drafted around Alex Sarr, like Zach Risacher is in a much better situation in Atlanta, and Sarr would have been better off going there, quite frankly, because of the talent level there, because there's veteran guys there, Trae Young, Bogdanovich, they're real NBA players there that can set you up for success. And if Risacher doesn't play straight away, there's a reason for it. It's because other guys on the roster are better. Reed Shepherd might get buried a little bit in the guard rotation depending on how things work out in Houston, but if he's out there, he's going to be playing alongside real legitimate NBA players, and they're going to prioritize him offensively, getting him in ball screens, having him come off screens. He's already one of the better, if not the best, floor spacer on the team, and that really is going to be the issue for Sarr. Is this just the worst case scenario set up for him in terms of where he ends up going? The situation around him, is that going to be the thing that holds him back? I think right now everybody just assumes that he sucks. I don't think he sucks. I just don't think that this is going to be a great situation for him, and it is going to require a ton of work and a ton of talent to overcome what's going on there in Washington.